So with that, I am going to get started on the introduction for our next keynote presenter. I'm very excited to formally introduce Dr. Andrea Hendricks. Welcome, Dr. Hendricks. And so a little bio about you before we officially get started. In her role, Dr. Hendricks leads Cerner's global diversity, community, and philanthropy efforts. I know I always say something, but her efforts in over 26 countries and in the US. So, in addition, she is a member of the Human Resources Leadership Team. She is making an impact on Cerner's culture by driving strategy and engagement initiatives that foster organizational learning and enhanced corporate diversity and inclusion vision for Cerner associates, leadership, and community collaborative partners. The Cerner Charitable Foundation and Community Engagement is under the umbrella of Cerner's diversity and inclusion area. Recently, Dr. Hendricks became an author of a new diversity and inclusion book titled The Big Journey, Bold Inclusion for Greatness, and she is currently working on a children's diversity book. So very exciting. Without further ado, Dr. Hendricks will be talking today about stimulating a leadership culture of accountability and allyship. Andrea, I'll have you take it away.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be here, and the things that you're doing to keep this dialogue going is absolutely remarkable. To you and your team, and certainly my team that helped prep for today, I'm honored to be with all of you, and I look forward to hearing more this afternoon in terms of this area. So let me get started. I don't have a lot of time to share, but I want to give you nuggets and maybe some ideas on how we approach this work and the importance of this work. And so there's a PowerPoint deck I'll be more than happy to share with everyone that is a part of it. And as we get started, I want to give thanks to my team, Renee Williams, who's working behind the scenes as well. So the topic today is stimulating a leadership culture of accountability and allyship. And we're probably wondering, why are both of those, accountability and allyship, coupled together? And I think as I go through my presentation, you will certainly learn a little bit about why it's important to look at both of those A words even more so now than ever before. So as we go on to the next slide, I want to, really kind of begin with the journey, and you'll see a couple of things on this slide. And I'll start out. Until recently, diversity and inclusion were thought of in the US as just US concepts, that if you think about 25 years ago, 30 years ago, not a lot of broad concept about that, but more companies, and many companies and governments outside of the US have begun to really advance the work of diversity and inclusion, and even naming chief diversity officers as a part of their platform to begin focusing on this area more intentionally as a strategy. So historically, you often saw programs or initiatives, but not strategy. And so we need to really think about, how do we get to accountability faster? And that's when we move from initiative focus, program focus, to strategy focus. So on the top part of this slide, you'll see, I'm not going to have time to cover all of it, but if you think about the rapid and massive demographic shifts, our reality across the globe. And so becoming more increasingly female, more increasingly younger, the older population, the elders are even staying in the workplace a lot longer, or even working part-time or contract, and then becoming more and more non-white, so more multicultural and more multi-ethnic. And this is what's keeping CEOs and CDOs and CHROs up at night. It used to be a couple of slides or images of inclusion, diversity, and a few other things, but now these are the top 10 trends or areas that are really impacting diversity and inclusion, and really having us to focus on accountability efforts much more broader than just in maybe the diversity space. So as more organizations have begun to adopt their own strategies towards fostering a diverse workforce and inclusive workforce, defining what diversity and inclusion really means on a broad scope is going to be more important for organizations to do because of the increase in global and multicultural and virtual teams are fueling these strategies of accountability and fostering the need for greater inclusion, collaboration, and innovation. So I don't have time to go deep into that, but look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the historical continuum. Most people, when you're developing strategy and you're looking at accountability, how did we get here? This is an opportunity for us to look at the landscape of where diversity was born. And I'm not going to, again, have time to go into this, but the dialogue has to begin at race. And when race and racism or bias and all of that was introduced into our communities, into our workplace, in order to get to accountability, we really have to pause and reflect on the historical continuum that led up to creating affirmative action plans and programs, civil rights, equal pay, all the way to where we are today, which I hope most of us are moving towards. How do we get to belonging? How do we get to the opportunities to have cultural intelligence more and more within our area? So it's oftentimes we don't want to focus on the past, race and individual or institutional or systematic or systemic a race or racism or bias. But if we don't focus on our past and really look at that adequately and address those as we go along the continuum, we're going to have a hard time achieving accountability and maybe even allyship, if you will. On the next slide, there's another way to look at this. And again, many of you have seen some of this before, past, present, and future. And I love to really talk about this because it's a great pulse check. Oftentimes you'll say, okay, where's your accountability? Where are you with ownership within your organization at the executive level, manager level, or even the associate or employee level on addressing D&I? Are you still living in the past? Are you kind of in the present? Or kind of the gray area and trying to move the needle to the future? Where are you with your efforts towards achieving accountability? It is hard, but it's important that we do a pulse check in that. So this slide really takes an opportunity to look at the evolution of work and giving you a chance to think about your organization efforts as we are in 2021 now. And so again, for organizations to truly have greater accountability, they must have a prescriptive design embedded right in their efforts in order for it to work. And we'll kind of give you a couple of examples of that. And I look forward to a dialogue at the very end as well. On the next slide, I want to share with you with such a diverse set of ways to engage, how Cerner Corporation has really tried to think about this and how do we look at how we focus our efforts enterprise-wide. We are in 26 countries, the United States. We have 28,000 associates, very multicultural and diverse in terms of our associate base. We're working on that executive or that leader level more and more as well. But we framed in order for us to have accountability, we framed ours in around four lenses: workplace, workforce, marketplace, and community. Probably no different than what you address, but this gives us intentional focus on how we're going to accomplish our efforts. And the four lenses are an opportunity for us to look at holistic transformation in collaboration with executives, leaders, associates, and even the community. It takes the community to help us as well. So our formal journey began in 2018. Yes, I am the first Chief Diversity Officer for Cerner, and that's okay. We had initiatives and programs, but not a strategy. And we are moving now to, in our second, going into our third year with more of a strategic focus and lens on what we're doing. Our accountability begins with an operating model, being connected to Cerner's operating model, right there with the Transformation Strategy Office, built right in so that leaders have accountability to how they operate their org units and their business units. Diversity is a part of that deck for performance, for compensation, and for associate engagement. We have it built right into those tools as well. And so over the last 2 years, we worked really hard to lift that. In addition to that, we've embedded that the strategy into the HR strategy functions. It's very important that every COE, Center of Excellence in the HR area, has a diversity plan, has a diversity platform. In order to drive accountability and leadership across our benefits space, our wellness space, our training and development space, we have to be connected, not separate, but seamlessly embedded with that. So every COE leader in the HR strategy, in addition to our org operating strategy, has accountability on how they're going to drive diversity and inclusion for our associates. On the next slide, that was a sneak peek, so I'll give you one more example in just a moment, but I want to get to, what do I mean by this? You're probably sitting there saying, okay, that's great, Andrea, there's accountability, but how do you engage that? So one of the things that I brought to the table is an engagement model. On the left-hand side, you'll see that engagement model there. And the engagement model has 5 steps to this process. And it really helps us build in on how are we going to provide inclusion and behave in this way to be successful. So if you look at this engagement model, it starts with enhancing, or it starts with, understanding, knowledge, expanding awareness, appreciation, influencing behavior. We cannot change behavior, but we can influence it by tools and resources, and certainly accountability, goals and objectives. And then we can create action. Oftentimes individuals want to, I want to know a little bit, and then jump to creating actions, but that doesn't have sustained behavior or sustainable efforts. And so we really have a process that we try to utilize in our development space, and certainly across some of our other areas. So let's slow down and look at a 5-step process to get to accountability. By influencing respectful inclusion behaviors, we encourage and we hope to develop a greater bond with those business units and those org leaders. That's where the allyship comes in, to partner with them to be more effective. And then after we build that bridge of appreciation and a bond of trust of why we're doing this in the D&I space, then there's a true sense of either belonging, partnering and collaborating on this, and allowing them to be diversity champions, or even championing this across the organization. So this is important, that as we build our culture, that we influence behaviors and create actions that have lasting change, not just check the box, but that last over time, and we can see that. The last thing I'll share on this page, you'll notice that on the right-hand side, Miss Willis, Charlene Willis talked about a book that I wrote in 2019. I became an author of The Big Journey, Bold Inclusion for Greatness. And what I had completed is several years of research, 50 interviews with top executives like yourself, to ask, what is the missing piece, or what would be the elements that you think would help us with driving diversity and inclusion forward and accountability? And I came up with 6 areas that are important for this framework, and 4 approaches. And I think many of you know these words, but when you put them together and work them together, you can see a greater lift within organizations and communities. And some of the individuals that I interviewed are currently using this model and framework. So for greater accountability around diversity, we must incorporate intersectionality. Oftentimes we look at gender as an example, as one lens, and we're not thinking about the intersectionality of gender, people of color that are women, or the millennial generations that are younger that are women. And intersectionality now has a big impact that can influence our behavior and create accountable ability and actions if we start looking at intersectionality. Diverse ideas and perspectives, innovation, inclusion, cultural intelligence. All of these 6 areas, I believe, provide us an opportunity to take a different frame, a different look at that. How are you leveraging intersectionality in your workforce? How are you experiencing intersectionality in your workforce? How are you developing through that? And then how are you cultivating lasting change for greater behavior? And so I won't be able to go in detail about that, but I believe if we start looking at those 6 areas, and especially intersectionality, because we're much more multi-ethnic, much more multicultural as a workforce, I think we could get at some of those things. There is a study McKinsey did, the definition of inclusivity or inclusion is designed by openness, equality, and belonging. And I think the greatest goal that we're trying to do with our organization when we're talking about accountability from leaders or from organizations is that we want employees to feel safe and express their thoughts. We want there to be a perception of fairness, respect, and equality within the workplace. And we want to ensure that employees, when they belong, that they matter and that they share positive connections with each other. So that's kind of out of the research, and there's so much more in this space that is important. Let's move on for the sake of time and share an example. So one of the examples with Allyship, I noticed we didn't have some of our business leaders and partners on board with accountability. And how do you do that? So at the end of 2019, we made a decision to create a program, and there's a couple in here, inclusion practices and principles, but it was called Allies in Action. And this was an opportunity for us to create and allow the accountability phase to kind of morph from within, if you will. So Allies in Action is designed to help associates expand their worldview about inclusion and best practice and how they can walk with one and be with one if they're not of one. And so men being allies of the Women in Action Associate Business Resource Groups, and individuals champion the Pride Associate Business Resource Group as an ally is so important for us to have the ability to transform our culture and influence our behavior. Like, Andrea, I'm aware of what we're doing in diversity, but I'm not really walking with you. And so the Allies in Action program allows for videos, for conversations, for diversity dialogues, for even internal messages from leaders who are truly wanting to say, I'm going to step up and be an ally to bridge bridges from breaking, and dividing in the workplace to bonding to belonging. And it's a fascinating opportunity that we created for our organization, and certainly can share more about that in the Q&A section. So I want to move on to 2 things that I want to leave you with as we close this session. Is we have an opportunity here to ask ourselves, who are we helping? So if you're a leader or you have leaders at the executive level or leader level, and you think about who are we helping, if we're just helping individuals that look like us, that mirror us, our backgrounds, our skill sets, we're not going to achieve greater accountability. So 1, it has to be embedded within your HR strategy. 2, it has to be embedded in your operating model. 3, you have to have a framework that really starts the dialogue. It includes programs and practices for success. The Allies in Action program that I'm sharing here is one of those examples. So let's look at this short video that talks about, to maybe help you think about who are you helping and how do you maybe think about getting different results. You need to see something different. You have to do something different in order to get different results when it relates to accountability. If you're still doing the same things that you did 5-10 years ago in this space, then you're not advancing the opportunity to have greater effectiveness. So let's watch this video, and then I'll end with a quick story before our Q&A. thank you for that. And as I end my conversation and look forward for some Q&A on the next slide, I want to share. So as you think about accountability and allyship, I mentioned earlier, we have to see something different, do something different in order to get different results. And this fable is one of my favorite stories. I'm going to do a very short version, but I will send it to the team and get a copy to you. But it's about two, and I hope you've heard this fable before. If not, it's fascinating. A giraffe and elephant live in a community. And Dr. Roosevelt Thomas is an author of a book called Building a House for Diversity. And in that book, he has a fable of these two living in the same community. The giraffe builds a house, they're friends. He invites the elephant over to look at his wood making shop, and the elephant goes over and he can't get into the house. The house is not designed for him. And so the giraffe has a solution. He has an expandable garage that can open up and allow people in, especially his wood making equipment. And so the elephant is able to get in through the expandable garage. The giraffe has a phone call from his boss. He takes the call and says, "Elephant, make yourself at home and look around." And the elephant does. And as the elephant walks through the house, he starts to break things and bump into walls, and you hear cracks and all kinds of noises. The giraffe comes down the stairs and says, "What are you doing?" And the elephant says, "I'm trying to make myself at home in your house." And the giraffe says, "Well, I have 2 or 3 things you can do. Go to the local Y and take some aerobics classes and lose some weight." And the elephant says, "That's not going to happen." The giraffe says, "Okay, go to ballet classes, become light on your feet, and come back to my house and you can see my house." And the elephant says, "That's not going to happen either." And the last thing is, why not join a Weight Watchers program, eat less, lose some weight, and come back to my house? And the elephant says, "No, maybe this house is not built for me." And so as you think about the moral of this fable or this story, and certainly I'll send it to you or you can find it, it's about how are we building our houses for accountability and for allyship if we're not building homes that have inclusivity in mind to allow others to come in. And so I want you to think about, are you on the giraffe side in your approaches, or are you on the elephant side in your approaches to building your house? And I would hope that you might need to have a blended approach of both to have accountability and allyship, but it can't only be from the worldview of the giraffe or the worldview only of the elephant in order for us to exist and to move the needle with diversity and inclusion. I am happy to be here. Thank you so much for allowing me to share just a little bit, a few nuggets of what I think we should be doing to stimulate diversity and inclusion, accountability. And so now I'm going to turn it back over to see if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And it's very clear to see why your next book is a children's diversity, equity, and inclusion book. I love it. I actually hadn't heard of that fable. So what a beautiful example to end your presentation. And let me jump right into a couple of questions for time's sake. We did have someone ask early on, what is your opinion on linking executive compensation to diversity and inclusion outcomes?
I think that is, I'm a fan. So I think that is a great idea. We do that with sales. We, when you're on different teams for achieving goals and motivating, having different incentives to motivate. And I think there is a delicate balance to that on how you do that. And that can be certainly a part of the compensation performance plan. It should not be solely on that, but it should be a mix. I think reward and recognition is fantastic. And how you do that effectively, it can come across many companies across the world are doing it. Cerner has started that approach this year. You know that last year was my first year and this is my second year. So we're building our plan, but we have included that as a part of our executive leader compensation. But it's delicately balanced and placed appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Understood. And that was a wonderful question. So a couple more here. How should organizations and or leaders model allyship? Could you provide any examples of how organizations and leaders can demonstrate this?
Absolutely. Tell their story. I think the first thing is all of us are diverse. Everyone is diverse. Everyone is diverse. So I have to say that, or they have a diversity or they have a diversity connection, a mother, father, sister, brother that's going through something. So find your story. I say voice, visibility, and vision. Share your voice, use your voice. You're in a position, have visibility, and then a set of vision. But start in your own backyard. We all have someone that's gone through a health challenge, persons with disabilities. We know we're connected, less than 6 degrees of separation. So hopefully that helps. That's a great way. Just do it and leave your own legacy. Start with your own story, share your own stories, and then it'll start to maybe go into something bigger and better in terms of the role that you play in that. Be a diversity champion. Being an ally is significant. If you're going to be a manager, leader, and executive, you have greater responsibility and accountability to show up in this space.
Well, thank you, Andrea. And to piggyback off of that, when we look at accountability and allyship, how do those work hand in hand? And if you can only focus on one as a primary start, as a starting line within your organization, which one do you focus on? I don't know if that's
yeah, but I think it's kind of like, does one come before the other, or the chicken before the egg, or who crossed the road first? Allyship is accountability. So to be silent, then you're not accountable. So if you're going to be an ally, and all of us, whether you're a person of color, a female or male or Caucasian or not, we can be an ally. Allyship is a good way to start with accountability. So first is join an ABRG, or do a video about why you support, or attend an event. I mean, there's some low-hanging fruits that don't cost a lot of time, talent, and resources, or treasure, if you will, money. You got to start somewhere, but allyship is accountability. So if you choose not to do that, then you're not going to be able to invest in accountable efforts, if that makes sense.
No, thank you so much. Simple question, but I felt like it just made sense for what we were talking about. Another question.
I've been watching the polls, seeing what the polls are.
That's wonderful. So something from Kimberly. As the first-time CDO, did you encounter challenges with gaining buy-in from executives? And if so, how did you address that?
Of course, no. So at Cerner, I have worked in this space for over 19, 20 years, had 2 other organizations, but for the first one at Cerner Corporation, absolutely, there were challenges. But I tell you what, the CEO of the company, and that's who I came on after he joined the organization, he made a personal investment and a professional investment in bringing on a talent to drive this area. And so he has been the greatest champion. If you don't have your CEO buy-in and looking at the executive leaders and the C-suite leaders and saying that this is important, it won't happen. He is visibly engaged. The CHRO is visibly engaged. And so having a seat at the table and a voice, yeah, there are going to be always challenges with others who are like, I'm going to stand back and see, but they'll come along because the accountability is going to be built in to the org performance, the business unit performance, and then the associate performance. So that's how we're going to get the work done. The CEO is sitting right there along with the CHRO, and that's what moves the needle in this space. But yeah, there'll always be challenges. If someone says no, they're not telling the truth.
I'm going to jot that down, Andrea. And I may use that from time to time. But thank you so much. We are at time, and I do need to get ready for our next session. But I know we've received a lot of comments asking for a copy of the video, a copy of your slides. So we'll get together. Absolutely. And I want to reassure the audience we'll get that over to you guys, and we'll get that taken care of. So with that, Dr. Hendricks, I'm going to wish you a goodbye and get ready for our next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.